Hello and welcome back. In today's tutorial, we're going to look at adding, so instead of kind of moving in and looking at the health system, we're going to go back and just create a particle system or a death effect for our mushroom, as well as I mentioned in the last video, we're going to expand on our AI for our character. So I'm going to go over that first. Okay, so in our game, you can see that I have coded for our mushrooms too. So again, we get hit and bounces us back. I have this coded where our mushrooms will collide and then they bounce back, or if they hit a wall. So rather than just patrolling between spots, you can kind of set them up like that. So I'm going to go over the code for that. So as we did in the last video, right, you could, so all I've done is really added a collision trigger to the script. So if we go over, so what we had in the last video, we looked at, so if the mushroom is, patrolling, so we'll go back up here. So if it's moving left and it hasn't reached the left limit, then it's going to continue going left. And then when it gets to the right limit, the left limit, it's going to set moving left as false, which now means that we're going to go down into here and so on. So the way to add it so this is our trigger where so on top of the mushroom that sets it active false, so it turns it off or kills it. So all I added was this code here, right? And all this is, so private on collision enter 2D. So this is, so if your mushroom, so again, your mushroom is going to collide with something. So the one thing that's different here, so I tried doing it, and this is something that I had to look up as well, right? So some of the scripting things, right, it's about learning as you go. So you can always play with the different codes and play around with the script and see what works. And sometimes it doesn't work. So initially I tried doing this as a, GameObject.compare tag is not equal to, so kind of what we've done before. So it's not equal to, but the scripting in this doesn't work that way for whatever reason. It doesn't recognize it. So I had to look this up, but either way, so what we're doing is you want to say if, so this is basically the collision, so not collision.gameObject.compare tag is the ground, or the collision.gameObject is not the player. So basically it's saying that if the mushroom collides with something and it's not the ground and it's not the player, then we're going to change its movements, right? So if it's moving left and it collides with a wall, let's say, well, now we're going to say moving left is, well, actually I'll leave with the mushroom, right? So if it's moving left and it collides with another mushroom, then we're going to say moving left is false, which is now going to, if we go back up here, it's going to set moving left to false, which means we go down here and it's going to move to the right and so on and vice versa. And then the same thing. So if it's moving left, then we would set moving left false, else, which means that it's moving right and it collides with something. Now we want to say, well, it collided with something, so moving left is now true. So all it really is, so the biggest thing is really this code here, which is slightly different in how you identify not the collision. And again, you have to set the tags. So again, in terms of our collisions, right, because originally I had it just as it's, and again, that's where we're sort of playing with it, playing with the code to see what works, right? And initially I thought, well, if it doesn't collide, so if it doesn't collide with the player, then it's going to switch. But then if well, it's always colliding with the ground. So you do have to identify that, or otherwise it's just going to move back and forth. And then again, in your objects here, you need to set what you want your objects to be set at. So in the grid, right? So in the grid, we have foreground. Just make sure you set your tags to ground, which is now, so that it recognizes, okay, it's colliding with the ground, so it's not going to switch back and forth between them, right? And that's really it for that. So your mushrooms, we already have tagged as mushrooms, so it's not the ground. So when it hits the mushroom, it's going to move. And then the other thing I added here is a wall. And this I added because, so I added it as a separate layer. I could have done it, I guess, as a level boundary layer. And we don't want it tagged as the ground, right? Because if it's the ground, then the mushroom is just going to continue to move and try to move through the wall. Or again, you could set these so that it has limits. So we could take this mushroom and we could set the left and right limits so that it's in between. But what I want to kind of show you though is, so I have this tagged as a wall, and what happens is you can't jump off of it, right? Because again, we're not on the ground. So if I jump on it, oh, and again, you stick to the edges, so you have to sort of play with those, right? But I can't jump because it's not tagged as ground. So an easy fix to that, and again, that was something that I had to sort of play around with, is, and not really a hard really thing to think about, is you really want the top of this to be the ground layer, right? So all you really need to do in this case is we can delete the top part of the wall, and I'm going to go to my foreground, which will make it now so that it is the, actually we want it as the sticky edges. So I'm going to make this as sticky edges, or sorry, the edges that are not sticky, so that way we're not sticking to the sides as you notice. Same thing, you want to make these so that they're slippery as well, so you can't just jump and get stuck there in the middle. And I'm going to go back and erase my foreground one that I do have on there. And that should be good. So now I should be able to go and jump off the ledge there. So what we're going to do is look at, so once this compiles here, so now when I jump on it, I can jump off that. So what we're going to do is go and add a, oh, and that was the other thing that I fixed as well. So you notice that when I jumped on top of it, I'm getting a, it's making a collision with the player. So I did, that time I missed the top of it. So I did change, I made the collider, so I forgot I made that, I did that deliberately. When I was playing with playing through the game and trying to figure out what was happening, so this trigger, so on these ones I made this trigger bigger. So I did make the trigger a little bit bigger, so because again what happens is because our collisions are continuous, sometimes as you collide, it's trying to detect a collision a frame or so ahead, so it's going to recognize a collision now with the mushroom and cause that hurt effect. So anyway, so I just made the trigger a little bit bigger compared to the triggers on this mushroom. So what we want to do is we're going to add a death effect. So when you hit it, that it creates a death effect with the mushroom. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty, no, sorry, so in our hierarchy, we're going to create an effect, and we're going to create a particle system. And you can see that this particle system is here. So a few of the things that, so first off, right now it is there, it's just behind the, so we're seeing kind of where those particles are. So you want to go down to your renderer, and we want to, so scroll down a bit, and the sorting layer we want to move to the front. So now we can see those particles. Same thing, we can change the size of these. So I'm going to go through some of the things that you can change, and then I'm going to set it the way that I've already sort of, again, looked at to, no, I don't want 51. So let's make it a little bit bigger. So let's make bigger particles. So by changing the start size, it changes the particle size. And then we don't want this looping. So we only really want one, so we only want it to happen once. So if we push play, it's going to, so when you jump on the mushroom, it's going to kill it, and then that particle system is going to activate. And because our duration is relatively long, that's why that goes on for 5 seconds. So we can lower this, so let's make it 2 seconds, push play, and again, we can go through and there it plays out. And that's the duration of how long that the particles are being created for. So we can even make that smaller if you want. Oops. Where was it? Okay, so decreasing the duration to 1, right? So it produces the particles for a shorter time period, but then they do move off. So we can change also the times that it's there for and so on. But I do want to go through and show you a few things. So I'm going to actually make the size of these a little bit bigger just so that you can kind of see what happens here. So if we play that, that's probably a little bit too big, so let's make it down to 8. So you can change, so you might want a spot where you have these big particles and then they decrease in size. So you can go to, so down here where we have these, we want to size over lifetime. And you can click on this. So turn it on. And then what you want to do, oops. So we want to change this graph here. So we want the particles to be big, and then we're really just shrinking down here. So we're going to make them big, and then they get smaller over the lifetime. So now if we push play, the particles start off really big, and then they continuously shrink in size till they disappear. Right, so that's kind of where that ties in there. In our case, this isn't really going to have an effect because I'm going to leave it like that anyways, but the settings that and again, play through the different things, play with some of the settings that I'm going to work through, and then use the one that looks right to you, right? So that's kind of the goal here. So I've already kind of looked through, and there's a few things that I've already played with, and I'm going to set. So my start size I'm going to set as 2. So the start speed, I want it as a bigger burst. Oh, and that's the other thing. Sorry, I didn't forgot to mention that as well. So down, so in the emission, so we have a rate over a time period. So that means it produces 10 over a time period. So we don't want to use that. So we're just going to put that to 0. And what we are doing is we're going to create a burst. So where the list is empty, you click plus and just leave that at 30. So what that's doing is it's creating a burst that's going to produce 30, and that's the goal there. So the duration is 1. Actually, I believe I had this much lower than that. So I'm going to put it at 0.5. And our lifetime, I'm also going to put in 0.5. And the start speed, I'm going to leave it 10 for now. The start size, 2. And I think the rest of these are fine in terms of what we're working with. The start color, you can change the color of this to kind of one that you want to use. I'm just going to set it to a pinkish color. And so again, you can push play to sort of see what that looks like. So it's producing this burst and sending them up. Okay, so some of the other settings here we want to change. So currently it is on play awake, which means that when the scene loads, it's going to automatically play it. So we don't want it to play until we set the script to play it. And then similarly, currently it does this burst that just sort of goes straight up. We want it spreading out in a spherical shape from our character. So we're going to click on the shape, and we can change it so that it is a sphere. So we can push play. So does the burst kind of out entirely from the, and again, depending on what object you have, you can change the shape of these. And I think, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, I actually meant to push play here. So play here, and that's sort of which particle system looks like. That goes fairly big, so I'm going to actually shrink this to even smaller, so 0.3 seconds. And push play again, and there you get this burst. So that looks good like that, I think. So that's it for the particle system. Now what we need to do is we need to change our script so that it is going to activate. Oh, actually, one other thing. Our particle system currently has a position set, so I'm just going to set it to the origin. And in the end, we're going to be nesting it under or parenting it to one of the mushrooms anyway. So I'm just going to go back to and make sure I know which one this is. So this control here. So I'm going to take the particle system, and I'm actually going to duplicate it. So we're just going to, and again, you could use the same particle system on other, on your character as well, right? So you can create it. Again, this is where, right, so I'm going to change this mushroom. So the first mushroom, so I'm just going to change that one, which means that none of these other ones will have this effect. So you can easily just delete the other mushrooms and go back in, or you can add them to it. So I'm going to take this and drag it up and attach it to, so now it's part of this game object now. Right, so the particle system is there with the mushroom. Now, one of the things that you will notice is that our particle system now has a transform away from the mushroom. Actually, I'll just leave that for now. So anyway, so to get this to work now, so in our script, we want to be able to turn that particle system on. So what we're going to do, so if we go down to our on trigger here. So this is our trigger. So we turn our game object off. So we kill the mushroom. So what we want to do is we want to set this as a coroutine, right? So when because again, same thing, so basically right now what's going to happen is we're going to jump on the mushroom and then the mushroom is going to disappear and we want this to play. However, if we set this inactive, right? So if we turn this off, this particle system can't play anymore because it's not active anymore, right? Because it's part of the mushroom patrol. So what we need to do is start a coroutine similar as we did with our player so that we can turn the sprite off and change the color and then turn and so on, right? So in the script, we want to start a coroutine. So we're going to, so if the collision is with the player, so start coroutine. And let's just call it mushroom death. No, I don't need the braces for this. So we're starting a coroutine and we're going to call it mushroom death. And I'm just going to, let's actually just delete that. So then in our coroutine, right, so again, if you remember from the last video, in our coroutine, we want to run those different things to turn the sprite off and so on. So first thing, so again, this is a private IE numerator, and it is the mushroom death. And put our braces in, and then we want to set things that are going to happen in this. So one of the things that we want to happen is we want to turn the particle system on. So particle system, so parts, I have to go back up and create that, and then dot play. All right, so this is going to play this particle system, but we haven't created this particle system yet. So up here, we need to create that component or get that component. So we're going to, so a private particle system. So private particle system, and we're going to call it part sys. And that's it for that. The other thing as well, same as we did for our player, we want to turn the sprite off because you can't set it inactive initially because otherwise it won't be able to play the particle system. So we want to get the sprite render. So private sprite renderer, and I'm going to just call this mush sprite. And then again, same as we did for the get components for the other things. So mush sprite equals get component. And we're getting the sprite renderer. Make sure that works. Yeah. So we're going to get the sprite renderer. And then I believe that's it for that. So now if we go back to our coroutine, we want to, so first thing we're going to do is turn the sprite off. So the mush sprite. So the mush sprite dot color equals new color. And we can turn it off using the RGB values, right? So if you remember from the last one, so it's the, right? So it's the, so mush, so our mush sprite dot color dot R comma mush sprite dot color dot G, and then the mush sprite dot color dot, so RGB dot B, and then we want to set that to 0F. So comma 0F. And that'll set our, or turn the sprite off essentially. And then, so what's happening now is, so our mushroom sprite is going to be turned off. The particle system is going to play at the same time. And then we want to wait, because we want to let the particle system play fully. We're going to wait, so yield return new, and then wait 4 seconds. And again, we set in the seconds. So I have the, I think we have the particle system set at 0.3, so we'll just wait that 0.3 seconds to let the particle system fully play. And then from there, now we want to destroy the game object. So in this case, so previously we had the, so we're going to destroy game object. So in the previous way we did this, we just set the game object active to false, right? And what that does is fine. It just sets the game object false. However, as you get, and especially if you are creating a game where you're able to shoot, or you're producing, in this case, if the particle systems is producing all those individual particles. So what happens is, as you have more things being created in the scene, they stay there, right? So you want to, so by destroying them, it just gets rid of them. So they're not in the scene anymore. So it just helps to limit the amount of things that are being created, and it just compiles in the game. So it can cause performance to slow down and lagginess and so on. In our case, for this game, it shouldn't matter. There really shouldn't be much impact. So we let that compile. The one thing that you need to do now, so in our mushroom patrol script, we need to oh, I know why, because I didn't. So this needs to be a serialized, so our particle system, so this has to be a serialized. So serialized field, so that we can access it in the inspector, so we can move, because again, it doesn't know where the particle or what the particle system is. So we want to be able to move that down into the inspector here. So when the trigger is with the player, then it's going to turn that particle system on. So in our mushroom site, so our particle system is this. So this is what we are turning on. So if we push play, okay, so hopefully, I don't know when I paused it, so I'm not sure. I'm nowhere near the end. The one thing that was happening is when you parented the particle system to the mushroom, so when you jumped on your mushroom, if your particle system was being activated somewhere else, that's because, so the particle system, in my case, this was set to 3 and 2.4, I think it was, or whatever it was. And that's because what it does is it's taking it, and when you parent it to another, so for example, if I take this and move, so right now this particle system is set to the origin. If I move it onto, actually I'm going to just duplicate it again so I don't have to recreate that. So if I take it and parent it onto, so move it onto that mushroom, you'll see that the distance now changes, right? And that's because it's going, so from this position, it's putting it back at the origin. However, that's not, because what you want to happen is from this mushroom, you want that particle system to be active from the mushroom, right? And again, if you remember what happened from before, when if it's off of the origin, right? So this is now the origin. And so now the particle system is going minus 22 from the mushroom, right? So it's going over here 22 and then down 8. So the particle system would activate over here somewhere. So you just need to make sure you take that particle system and you set it to 0, 0, which now sets it to the mushroom, right? So now that particle system is where the mushroom is. So anyway, so that's that. So if we play it now, so when we play it, the particle system should be activating where your mushrooms are. So we can kind of do this one, and I'll go up to the top just to make sure they're there. That would be the error that you may have in terms of if your particle system's not where you want it to be. So that's good. That's where we want it. So right at the mushroom. And I'll go up here. Oh, actually this mushroom, that's right, because I have it set so it walks off the edge so I can jump on it. And, oh, that's right. So I didn't, because I had just parented that, I didn't say where the particle system was. So you do need to make sure you, so that's this particle system, and then attach it, and so on. So anyway, so that's this video. So, the biggest thing is, again, you don't want to do this for all of these. You're not going to reset the particle system, so on. really what you're going to do is just delete these. So we're going to delete the other mushrooms that we have. And then you're just going to take the one that you have created and you're going to make copies of it and then just move it around and reset your patrol limits and so on. So that's it for this video. So that's the death effect. In the next video, we'll look at doing the character health system. So where you, when you do hit the mushroom, you lose health, and then where you eventually, if you don't have any health, you lose a life and so on. So that's it for now. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.